I guess two things I want to discuss today, a little esoteric. One is whether or not I need a big long bar 90cc powerhead chainsaw, or can I get away with a small, light, in this case 60cc chainsaw with a short bar. And the other one is about fun. To me, what this has always been about with a YouTube channel is sharing the experience with my kids, grandkids, and friends, and whoever else is interested in going along for the ride. But I'm not trying to sell you anything. I'm not trying to tell you what's right or wrong. It's just not in the metric. You know, I have opinions, I'll state them. Now I'm going to tell you up front, if you think I'm going to break out a felon saw with a 28-inch bar and sort of swing that around in this stuff here, you're nuts. We're going to have to start with a 24 and work from there. That has to represent the big saw, because to be honest with you, that's as much as I want to handle today. So here's my project saw. Frankly, I've been having a lot of fun with this saw. This is a good saw. And I don't know if you noticed, this is now a modded saw. You know what's modified? See if anyone can look at that carefully and figure out what it is. This my thoughts on my big saw is this is a lot of fun to run right here. And one of the things I like about it is all I have to do is set it on the log. I don't have to rev it up and hit the branch or log. All I have to do is just hit the throttle and boom, it goes. I like that in a saw. Always have. You know, some of my older saws, you have to rev it up, get the chain speed up before you can start cutting. But that saw and my 5.72 and saws like that, not really. You don't have to do any of that. Just pull the trigger and go. You know, you don't have to have it all wound up. So when I'm hanging like this, working on the ground, the weight of that saw didn't bother me much at all. And because it's fun and it has that real easy power, that throttle response and power, even working up in here wasn't so bad. When I started getting up there, that's heavy. Now I want something smaller. So I'm going to switch to a smaller saw and continue. Does anybody know why I left that tree right there? Yeah, that one. How about the one by my saw? Why do you think I left those? Based on where I had to work. Yeah, I'm not interested in having a log roll down the hill, so I always put a tree or two in between me and it, especially if I'm working on the downhill side. And I always work from the top in so that they're broke out. I don't really have any heavy wood uphill of me. But here's the question. Between the two saws, if you had to choose based on what you just saw there, not my opinion, which one would you have chosen? getting low. Not out yet. So how about now? Which one do you think is the better saw? I got to tell you, I like running both of them. Sometimes I like this one, sometimes I like that one. And the point to me is they're both a lot of fun. And who gives a frick whether one's a little bit better than the other? I enjoy them both. I think that's ready to get pulled. Yeah, I'm going to pull these tops. I'm not going to lock them up down here. Get them up closer to the trail. This little thing here is a freaking hot rod. It's a lot of fun, you know. And it starts and restarts and does all the things that a saw's supposed to do. But it's got a little itty bitty bar. You know, I'm thinking I probably ought to put at least a 20 on this thing. That'd make it a little bit more useful. If I could find a small mount 24, I'd do that too. So really, if I was to try to quantify all this and say what's the best saw for me for that kind of work, it's whatever one I feel like running at the time. And if I wanted to try to come up with a formula, it'd be a 562 with a 24-inch light bar. But I really like running that 575. It does everything I want it to do. So it's the best saw today. Yeah, that one. I like it. But you know, that one's really cool too. How do you go wrong? You know, they're both fun. I had a lot of work to do. Now look what I came up with. In the junk bin, I had these total super bars, which are for small mount. You can tell from the way the oil hole is. But they have a wider tail. I don't know if that was by design or just pure luck. But they also have a relatively rugged tip with the 6 rivets, and 325, 50 gauge. So I found a 9-pin 325 sprocket, and notice how the chain goes on to the bar. I don't think I'm going to have a problem with that tossing a chain, but I'm going to have that extra diameter. So here's the thing you got to think about with gearing, right? It's not a number of teeth, although obviously the number of teeth is how they're purchased, right? You can't have a half a tooth on a sprocket, so it's going to be, you know, 7, 8, or 9. But what you got to think about, when that crankshaft goes 1 revolution, the distance traveled is defined by the diameter. The distance that the chain moves is determined by the diameter of that sprocket. So, for example, let's say arbitrarily that's 4 inches. So 1 revolution of the crankshaft, that tooth is moving forward 4 inches because it is going to move forward by the diameter of that by that rim. Where this one might be 3 inches, right? Using arbitrary numbers. That's why the bigger sprocket gives you a higher chain speed, because the distance traveled by a tooth is going to be determined by the diameter of the sprocket. Of course, the bigger the sprocket, the longer the travel is per revolution, and that's why you do that. So I've got a 9-pin, which is roughly like an 8-pin 3/8. There's a 7-pin 3/8. Now that, on the other hand, gears it down. That gives a mechanical advantage to the saw using a smaller sprocket, right? Where the larger you go on the diameter, you're giving more and more mechanical advantage to the chain. Even though you have speed, you got to think about it like this. There's a lever from the center of that crank to the outside of that sprocket. And if that lever is longer, that means the chain has more leverage on the saw to hold it back. If that distance is shorter, that means the chain has less of a lever to crank on that crankshaft and hold it back. And conversely, the longer that is, the less mechanical advantage the saw has on the chain, and vice versa. I hope that makes sense. It's really simple. It's not rocket science. But this ought to make a fairly significant difference in how this little John thread performs. Now, I want you to look at that right there. See that? What do you think that is? I don't think I'm the first person who ran that saw that had a chain come off, because it's not unusual on narrow mount bars with 8-pin sprockets to have the chain get tossed. And that's why we're going to this one. But this fellow who had the saw before me obviously struggled with the same thing. Here's my solution. Yeah, see, it's actually engaging with the bar fairly quickly. There's not a lot of distance, and there's not a lot of space between the bar and the chain for a branch to get in there, a piece of brush to toss it. So I think this will be a more stable environment for that saw. We'll bring it out and try it. It's hot as hell right now, so I'm going to be doing indoor work, not outdoor work. Pretty stubby looking with that little 16-inch bar on a big saw like that, but fun and games and firewood, it'll be fine. I think I'm going to look and see if I can find one of those in, say, 20 inches. Because that might be the right solution. And also I want to make sure it oils properly and all that. But and I had the local shop cut me a chain, because the number of links I need was 68. And I had 66 and 72, but I didn't have any 68 link chains. So got one now. Got this little saw in. won't start. I guess I'm going to have to take a look inside the muffler to see how bad the piston is, because it only has about 100 pounds of compression. Let me redo that and show you. Get about 10 pulls on this and we'll see what we have for a read. Ten pulls. Especially on a little saw like this, I want to have it up over 130 in the 140 range. So down around 100, yeah, you know, I might be able to get it to run, but it won't run well. So before I go trying to go crazy, because what happens when the compression's low, it's not just a compression for firing, but it's also the primary compression for pulse to the carburetor. Everything goes down. I don't know if that makes sense, but let's pull the muffler and see. These are real simple saws. You know, I don't know what a top end on these cost. I don't know what it's worth. These are the, not the 350 styles, the 450, which is an X torque. So while it has the same basic layout and what it looks like on the inside, it's just black. So poor little saw. The ring is stuck is what it looks like to me. I might be able to free up the ring and hone it and get it running that way. That might happen. But this is a farmer saw. God only knows what they use for oil. It probably got a mix of two-stroke oil and hydraulic oil, for all we know. But when you see it black like that, but there's no scoring on the rings, but there's a little on the piston, oftentimes it's a lubrication failure. So anyway, it's not going to run.